Hello again. I'm making another video. This time I'm going to talk about Symmetra, who's my main. Um, I'm in gold elo, so be warned if that triggers you. I'd probably click off the video now. Anyway, let's get started. I have a lot to talk about. As I said, Symmetra is my main, although I flex to healer if it's necessary. Or Brigida or Zarya. I don't really consider Brigida to be a healer in the truest sense of the word, at least not currently. I've played Symmetra since launch extensively, which means I've experienced every iteration of her kit. And with that in mind, I can confidently say that the current version of Symmetra is her best in both terms of balance, gameplay, and theme. It is a dynamic kit that regards player engagement, which means it's very good for balancing at multiple levels of skill. She has a really big distance between her skill ceiling and her skill floor in her current edition, as opposed to her previous editions where everything was a little bit more uniform, and it was a bit difficult to sort of get her to work at higher levels without breaking her at lower ones. But this one has alleviated that problem completely, which is something I kind of wish they did with the Mercy rework, but that I talked about in my other video. I'd like to begin by talking about the role of utility characters in Overwatch, which Symmetra is probably the quintessential example of. Utility characters have had a very poor history in Overwatch in comparison to their more staple counterparts like healers, tanks, and damage dealers. The general consensus is that every slot on your team needs to be dedicated to an easy to understand and execute purpose, and if anything falls too far outside of that, it's superfluous at best and hindering at worst in the eyes of most of the community. If we look at heroes like Sombra, Mei, and Symmetra, it's clear they tend to struggle in terms of balance and performance historically, and tend to have pick rates that sit around the below 1% mark. The result is usually from Blizzard opting to err on the side of caution and sort of undertuning them, I feel, or making them slightly underpowered so that they don't break the game. You can blame Mei and Symmetra from their beta because they were absolute monsters with 75 health shields and whatever the hell Mei was doing in the open beta. I think she was an infamous character. In my opinion, the closest thing I can say is a meta utility hero is Zarya, who I would say is an example of what happens when a utility hero is designed elegantly and balanced properly. Zarya by most people is considered an off-tank, but her selling points are her ultimate ability and also her ability to cleanse and rescue allies with her projected barriers, which is more of a defensive utility than actual straight-up tanking. The result of this is her popularity as a hero and her acceptance by the wider community as even a safe bet as far as hero picks go. Most of the time, people will not flame you for playing Zarya, even if you're not doing that great. A possible counter-argument against me thinking that niche heroes are underpowered is that niche heroes aren't supposed to do anything more than what they were intended to do, and need to be swapped off once you don't need them. Once you've broken point A with Symmetra's teleporter, you've got to switch off and start playing a less controversial hero in order to not make your team get worried. My response to this is that if you keep making heroes with one hard-locked purpose that's really razor-defined, like Sombra's use almost exclusively as a counterpick to specific comps, then we end up with the game that everyone hates, that Seagull was talking about in his super viewed video, where everything is hardline countered by something else. Counterplay be damned. This balancing and designing of niche heroes to be rendered wholesale useless outside of their one purpose will mean that they need to be unquestioningly able to insta-gib their one targeted strategy or enemy. Otherwise, they are just superfluous code in the game, and you might as well play something more generic. So, niche heroes, like, it's a fine argument against symmetra being useful outside of one situation, but like the practice of balancing for niches means we're gonna have this hard counter, no counterplay game. There are gonna be heroes that are just obscenely good at one thing and nothing else, and they'll absolutely shit on the more generic heroes, making them useless in most situations. I mean, that isn't where we are now, but like, as they add more and more heroes, it's going to become more and more of a problem. I mean, it's either that or 75% of the hero roster is completely useless, and nobody's bothered by it because it isn't stomping their games, so it doesn't need to be balanced. Anyway, moving on to, back to Symmetra herself. I think her numbers are actually pretty good. They've been balanced quite well. But her crucial failings are all in quality of life and how it affects the pragmatism of actually playing the hero. Blizzard dropped the ball almost immediately after releasing Symmetra 3.0 and just moved on to other things. Her kit is plagued with bugs for a start, and Teleporter, well, to be fair, is a bug testing nightmare. So that's kind of forgivable in my opinion. But the crucial issue with Symmetra is that her kit lacks pragmatism. For sake of structure, I'm going to go through each of her abilities to make sure I get everything that I wanted to talk about. Starting with her turrets. Symmetra's turrets, I think, are the big winner in the rework. Literally everything about them is stronger now, including the reduction to 3. The changes to Symmetra's turrets have exclusively served to increase her pragmatism as a hero. I'm going to be using that word a lot because I think it's very acutely her issue right now. Every aspect of her new turrets is well thought through, with actually playing her hero and performing well in mind. My only complaint is that while travelling, the turrets have a gargantuan hitbox and will snag on corners and narrow corridors that you didn't want them to, and are frequently destroyed by accident by your enemy, as opposed to on purpose, which I am fine with, like if a Winston goes after them. Like, I feel Symmetra is always going to have trouble competing against other heroes who don't have their damage accidentally deleted by the enemy Reinhardt fire striking at your team at the right time, and until this is fixed/reduced, the hitboxes of her turrets while flying, or they should just be immune, I don't think that would break her character. Possibly also, she should have a 4th turret held, not placed. She can only have 3 out at a time, as she needs her gameplay to run smoother on defense, and it's too easy right now to just shut her down and she just becomes kind of a dead weight. So I think an extra turret in her pocket would really help with that. Moving on to her teleporter. The non-Symmetra player's only reason to consider Symmetra existing. While it is Symmetra's strongest power in quotation marks, I can't talk about this ability without drawing attention to the fact that it is plagued with quality of life issues, which fixing are critical to getting Symmetra into a healthy place. This ability is fantastic. As an ex-LeBlanc main from League of Legends, this was easily one of my most favourite skills ever, being able to make return trips into the enemy team's backline. Throw in the fact that you can pass through your turrets, various abilities, and even your entire team through it. I earnestly believe this thing could rival Defense Matrix or Biotic Grenade as one of the superpowers of the game. It's been a year since its inception, and I still encounter people daily who just ignore it. In the average player's mind, the teleporter is an inert object that can't hurt anyone. It's kind of hysterical to kill people using it with your turrets and just jumping onto them. Unfortunately, the misconception also extends to my team. However, the teleporter is riddled with quality of life issues that make its success rate extremely low, lower than I would deem necessary for balance. As of right now, it only lasts 10 seconds and takes a second to come online. For the purposes of rescuing a teammate like Zenyatta, or escaping a graviton with your team, two things that Blizzard has gone on the record as saying are intended uses, it only works about 10% of the time, which is completely unacceptable compared to other heroes. My recommendations are either give it a permanent duration so it becomes a game objective that confers benefits to your team and the enemy needs to destroy, like a Torb turret, or give it a much faster activation for reactive plays. In either of these cases, it also needs to consistently place the entrance right below your feet, not randomly in front of you at varying distances. Also, it needs to destroy railings, as you often want to be placing it on high ledges. A less necessary change would also be to give it a more generous range for teleporting objects, like turrets or even people, to press the activation key. That's all I have to say on that for the time being. Moving on to our ultimate. Photon Barrier. A little bit controversial, but I think Photon Barrier is strictly better than the teleporter. Not strictly better than the old shield gen though. The old teleporter was basically a Best Buy mass res that could be destroyed easily. This ultimate perfectly embodies Symmetra's design, its utility, offensive, defensive, and also difficult to comprehend what it's doing until too late. Symmetra, by design, is the queen of hard light, so it's only natural that her ultimate would be an absolute testament to that. Not much to say here, it's working as intended, and also it requires a lot of player skill, so it's balanced for a lot of skill brackets. Although, maybe not for bronze, but Symmetra has things in her kit that she can use to deal in that situation. Onto her secondary fire. It's a bit of a mixed blessing. I kind of miss the fact that it could pierce shields, but they have tried to give her some other ways to deal with shields that I'll get onto later. But anyway, I think it's fine that they've gotten it to work as intended, and it does a lot of good damage, and yes, it's functional. However, I do resent the fact that it's kind of more generic as a weapon now, much like a Junkrat or Pharah is the most tight comparison I can give. So yeah, it's a little bit sad that she's got a more dull weapon now. Moving on to the big bad of her rework, her primary fire. Symmetra's primary fire now consumes the enemy team's hard light, or their shield barriers, and turns it on them, causing you to grow in power to hyper-carry levels. This is fantastic and conceptually awesome to play with, and also the last nice thing I have to say about it. It's completely useless. So useless that a lot of high-level Symmetra players recommend unbinding it. If this was literally on any other hero in the game, it would be unacceptable. Although Reaper's Shadow Step is similar in tier, but at least it's not like a literal firing mode of the actual character's weapon. I don't care that the lock-on is gone. I'm more bummed that they just cloned Zarya's weapon and then tacked it on. The same thing I had to say about the secondary fire. I don't really understand why they balanced it the way they did. They basically gutted it and then left it alone after the bug on the PTR. Like, they just wanted to get it out of the limelight. We don't want to have to worry about it anymore, and we don't want people getting pissed off about it. so we just need to get it to a place where nobody gives a shit about it. They nerfed her ammo down to 70 from 100 for some reason. That completely eludes me. Like they thought, oh god, what have we created? Is this symmetra going to destroy everything? Let's preemptively nerf it so that we don't have to worry about it. I would be fine with it and all, but it's been a year and it's gotten only 2 extremely ginger buffs, while the meta is plagued with high sustain mass tank comps screaming for a hero that can break the ranks of a fight that goes on too long. Even with the unique shield cracking aspect of her weapon, she's still not at all that fast at breaking shields, even when compared to other heroes who have to reload during the attack. So yeah, I feel like they really missed the mark on this one, and it needs to be radically changed. Anyway, that's everything in her kit, although I'd just like to add that a big part of why her primary kind of sucks is that they've gotten rid of a lot of personal defense utilities in the rework, like her old photon barrier, which was probably one of the highest skill abilities, and also her shield gen, so now she's just squishier as a target. And then they've given her this weapon that requires her to stand in this extremely dangerous position in order to get any value out of it, and even when you do, its tick rate is just dead in the water. So yeah, kind of a big disappointment there. But everything else I think is markedly better overall. Moving on to my last point, community perception. To be honest, the community perception of Symmetra has really lagged behind the rework. Mostly, I think, because it's convenient. It's much easier to hit tab and start looking at the 6 portraits on your team than it is to develop adequate game sense. The usual situation I find myself in Gold Elo is that as soon as you lose the first fight, your team just trickles for 2 whole minutes while you're waiting for them to group up. And then someone jumps into voice chat and says, "Sim isn't working." I don't know what to do in that situation because entertaining them isn't going to do them any favors. But if I tell them the truth, I risk them losing their shit and throwing the game. In addition to this, even after a year after a rework, I still encounter players who haven't had an interact button bound, so they just ignore my teleporter. So it's a bit rough that having my value as a character diminished purely through the negligence of other players. Which sounds really snooty, but that's what it is. Anyway, all that being said, I think Symmetra is no longer an outlier in receiving toxicity through merely existing. You actually have to underperform with her now before people will start trying to pin stuff on you. Which is about the same level of courtesy that other more palatable heroes like Widowmaker and Hanzo are currently at. During the time of writing this script, Symmetra recently was played in the Overwatch League and very conspicuously helped win a point, although it was largely by element of surprise, which isn't a sustainable strategy to maintain a position as a meta hero. So we're still not there yet, Blizzard, I'm sorry. My closing notes are Symmetra's current edition, I would say, is 75 to 80% good, excellent even, with the remainder being unnecessary quality of life issues. If Blizzard can fix those, then we could very realistically have a new game-changing character, and in a healthy way, not like the make goats the only meta played in Overwatch League for 2 years sort of way. Unfortunately, Blizzard's turn cycle for balancing is much slower than most, so we may need to wait a while. And with that, my video is done. I hope you liked watching me speed paint a dodgy Symmetra sketch in the background. And I hope to make some more videos in the future, although I don't really have any ideas, so please let me know if you give a shit and have any. See ya.